Jazz drummer. Rock drummer. Jazz drummer. Rock drummer. It's easy to grow up with an image in our minds, like jazz drummers, mostly black and white footage from the 50s or 60s, playing in a little club with a little bippity-bip 18-inch kick drum and a couple of horns. Rock drummer, stadium tour from the 80s. Alex Van Halen. 2 kick drums and a pyro rig. And that's all well and good until we get to school or start getting gigs and have to play jazz. Then the tune calls for brushes or a jazz beat. And we can't teleport back to the 50s or put on a madman suit or change the size of the kick drum or make the world black and white. So what do we do when we actually have to play jazz? Conversely, what if you've been in a music school bubble for 6 years and you've only been playing your little Slingerland vintage kit on cocktail gigs and you catch a rock tour? I know that's not super realistic in these troubled times, now more than ever, but just stick with me. So today I'm going to show you the top 5 subtle differences between jazz drumming and rock drumming. I'll be pulling out both the jazz and the rock kits, but I'll also be showing you things that transcend the kit you're playing. Because if you're playing jazz at Spike Hill or Local 269 in my day, and didn't want to schlep your drums, you were stuck on a punk rock kit. Anyway, the top 5 differences between jazz drumming and rock drumming right here. In this room. What? That's it. That's my intro. Shouldn't we cut to the... Almost forgot. Stay tuned. Difference 1. Jazz has cymbals higher in the mix. People are always saying jazz is played from the top down, which I assure you is false. But jazz does indeed focus on the cymbal more. It centers the cymbal, to use the postmodern speak all the kids are on about. Demonstration. Okay, here I am behind the jazz kit. People will say jazz is swing eighth, rock is straight eighth, but that's not true. The key is acoustic environment. Jazz evolved in clubs where amplification was often not necessary. If you imagine having a perfect acoustic environment to play in, i.e. it's not too boomy but everybody can hear everything, you have a big range of timbre to play with. People not only hear your cymbals, but the tone of your cymbals. So you can make the cymbal beat the focal point. In rock, however, in a rock group, you're amplified, even if you're at a small club. So you're projecting over a volume floor. There's a minimum level of ambient noise you have to punch through. So the jazz beat sounds decent on the rock kit as long as you have the right cymbals. But if you imagine projecting over 80 dB of ambient guitar and bass, that's going to get washed out. So rock drummers might still play the ride cymbal, but they'll elevate the kick and the snare in the mix. So that cymbal, instead of being the centerpiece, is just kind of laying down a carpet. And that's also why jazzers spend so much money on cymbals, because at a jazz gig, you can hear all those lovely overtones. In rock, that's all going to be washed out by the amplification. So cymbal companies started making thicker, heavier, uglier cymbals, which would cut above the amplification. Takeaways. If you're used to playing rock and you're playing a jazz gig, think about bringing the volume level of your beat below the volume level of the cymbal and playing that cymbal super clearly. And extra credit, try to get a nice ride cymbal. Some of the Zildjian K dry rides and Meinls will work decently in both settings. They'll cut through in rock and sound a little like Dijonette in jazz. If you're used to jazz and you're switching to rock, think about elevating the dynamics of the kick and the snare above that of the cymbal in the mix, so that those become the focal point. Okay, difference 2. Jazz drummers usually play off the drums, while rock drummers usually play through them. In a low to medium volume acoustic environment, you can hear the timbre of head noise. So you can tune the drums high and get a nice bite of articulation when you play them. You're more likely to hear a paradiddle or a double stroke roll or even a buzz roll. In jazz, you'll often hear rim shots on the toms. Let me do a little demo. If you're playing with a small piano trio in a small club, say Cornelia Street Cafe, these high-tuned drums with coated heads are going to sound great. On a gig, you're more often playing through the drums. Toms are often tuned lower, more often with clear heads, though still sometimes with coated. You're less likely to hear a quiet paradiddle, but more likely to hear machine gun singles, which sound great amplified or through triggers. If you try playing the jazz stuff on a rock gig with amplification, it won't project over the wall of sound, and you'll lose a ton of nuance. And it's not so much that jazz toms won't sound good if you hit them hard. Brian Blade's proven that. It's also that you have the low dynamic range at your disposal too, so why not utilize it? Takeaways. For the jazzer playing rock, you're going to get tired, you're going to get blisters, and people are likely going to yell at you to play louder. So take a page from David Kola, or from my video last week, and practice playing from the elbow, with a high stick height and playing through the drums.
If you want to sound like Aaron Spears, you need to hit like Aaron Spears.
For rockers playing jazz, opposite thing. Practice doing your rudiments quietly on the toms. If you only ever swing for the fences, you're just going to blow everybody out and waste the opportunity to play more subtle things. Similarly, difference 3. Modern rock has more closed cymbal sounds. Let me show you what I mean by dry sounds. Closed hats. Ride cymbal bell. Those are the primary ones, and you're likely to hear something like this. So those are the primary ones, but there are also rim shots. On a rock gig in modern times, you're highly likely to hear a fill like this. And again, fills like this are probably an adaptation to having to project over a floor of ambient sound. In jazz, it's not like rim shots and cymbal bells are totally absent. But you'd be less likely to hear something like this during a drum break or soloing. Drummers like Ari Honig and Brian Blade are incorporating more rock vocabulary into jazz, but what you have in jazz are primarily 2 things. First, the acoustic freedom of not having to project over a wall of amps. Second, a century of tradition. Philly Joe. Blakey. Even in modern jazz, a solo is meaningfully more likely to utilize the drum and wet cymbal sounds. And less likely to default to closed hats. Takeaways? I think you get it by now, right? Let's get a little more subtle. Difference number 4. Jazz is somewhat more horizontal. Bro, that's what she said! Dude, save it for Zach Grooves. We don't make those jokes on this channel. We're serious Asperger's-y music school nerds here. Male Asperger's-y music nerds. My bread and butter. Besides, how do you know it's a she? I won't stand for your cisgendered, heteronormative. So what I mean when I say jazz is horizontal is you wouldn't play a swing beat like this. 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or a straight 8th groove like this in most cases. Because the cymbal's a focal point and we have acoustic space, we'd usually try to lay down some kind of 8th or 16th note matrix, whether it's straight or swung. In rock, you could kind of do the same thing. But it's unnecessary, and will get mostly washed out anyway. Besides, you've got guitarists applying a lot of the 8 or 16th note matrix, so why waste the energy? It's not like we get paid by the note. So rockers playing jazz often leave more space than they need to. You got space to fill and the room to play an 8th or 16th note matrix. Which brings us to the last difference between jazz and rock drummers. As in, that is all there is. You will never hear somebody else with another difference ever. Difference 5, the hi-hat. In jazz, you're way more likely to hear the hi-hat with the foot incorporated into a groove or solo. And when you do hear this in rock, it's very often from somebody with a jazz background. And I'm not a historian, but I know the hi-hats evolved to play on 2 and 4 during the big band and bebop eras. And drummers like Elvin, DeJohnette, and Roy Haynes started using them in other places. So while you'll sometimes hear rock or fusion players keeping quarters or 8s on the hats, you're less likely to hear something like this. With exceptions. So what have we learned? I'd like to think I pointed out 5 non-obvious differences about the way a rock drummer and a jazz drummer approach playing the kit, that go deeper than just whether they're in Brooks Brothers, whether they've got an 18-inch kick, or whether they're in grainy black and white. Now, some astute viewers may be thinking, yeah, but a lot of the differences are about drum size and tuning. True. And drum sizes and tuning are themselves an adaptation to the acoustic environments where they evolved. But it's deeper than that. Because if you just switch up the drum sizes and tuning and don't change the approach or the vocabulary, it won't sound authentic. In this lesson, I at least took a stab at showing you the right approach to get the most out of each context. Got it? Anyway, if you've been following the channel for a hot minute, you've been checking out the videos, you dig them, you feel like you might be ready to go a little deeper, maybe you're ready to study with me, I recommend my course, the coaching course, which, apropos of this week's lesson, has parallel jazz and, we'll say, backbeat tracks, which serve as cross-training to make both sides of your playing stronger. We also like to say the coaching course is like studying with me for 6 to 9 months for around the price of a single lesson. But we only open it up a few times a year, and we only open it to people on my mailing list. Ergo, to get on my mailing list, just click the link below the player and enter your email address in on the next page. And to show my appreciation for helping you help you, I'll send you a free gift. I'll send you my 3-video mini course, which I assert will make you better in the next 3 weeks than you've gotten in the previous 6 months. You can think of it as a gateway drug to the coaching course. To get there, just click the link below the video and enter your email address in on the next page, and I'll send those to you. Dudes, it's been real. Always enjoy these lessons of the week. See you again next week.